I'm Carrie Penny, and you're listening to Secret Heart Broadcasting. Welcome to Secret Heart Broadcasting, and on today's show, I am so thrilled to explore the third act with Vicki Stroich, who just a dear friend, and I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for ages. I'm so glad it's happening now. Vicki is joining us from, I was going to say her tiny home, but really the offices of Caravan Farm Theaters, which are on the traditional territories of the Sequopemke Nation and the Sialal Okanagan Nation in what is now known as the interior of British Columbia, Canada. When I first conceived this conversation, which I think is about 5 years ago, I was asking Vicki about, hey, you know how in plays, when there's the third act, can we overlay this on the life of, humans and particularly women? And even back then you said yes, so yay. When I met you, you were a dramaturg and then managing director of a very large theater company in Canada. And now you're doing work at Caravan Farm Theater. How about we start there? What is Caravan Farm Theater? And you've kind of had this very interesting career pivot that must have at some point been inspired by listening to your own intuition or your own secret heart. Tell me how you got to where you are, Vicki Stroich.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I when I was in high school, I cared about theater, and I just kind of discovered theater and studied it in university, and had the good fortune to do an internship at Alberta Theatre Projects, the large theater we were just discussing, and in Calgary. And I discovered dramaturgy, which is a particular support function in the theater based largely on supporting people when they're writing plays, or choreographers when they're creating choreography. So supporting artists as they're creating something, and particularly around narrative and around story. I had the opportunity to work with largely playwrights from across Canada, and meet theater people from across North America who did dramaturgy and similar things to what I did, and thought a similar way that I thought in terms of the way our brains work. That sort of asking questions, helping to guide story and guide and support writers. So I did that work, and my questions about the work got bigger, and they led me to leadership roles, like the executive directorship at Alberta Theatre Projects. And that was a really interesting way to grow my learning, and try to understand how things worked, so I could try to see if I could help them work better. And I also, a while back, I kind of always cared about the environment as well. Was one of those little kids who had photos of dolphins and penguins up on my wall, and really thought a lot about the earth. But when you're working at a really busy nonprofit, you don't have a lot of bandwidth, unfortunately, to think about the other things you're passionate about. But I also started a hobby in my 30s, surfing, which took me to the ocean, and that kind of reconnected me with a passion for the environment and the health of the environment and the connection that we as people have to nature. And I started to, as I was thinking of leaving Alberta Theatre Projects, and as I was thinking about what the next step would be for me, I thought, well, I would like to contribute to something else that I care a lot about. I care a lot about arts and culture. I care about theater. I care about storytelling. I also care about the environment. And so how do I do that? And I wasn't so sure, but I just knew that the first thing I had to do was find organizations that inspired me, ask questions, maybe volunteer. And as I was leaving ATP, I also got this great opportunity to learn about social innovation and change making through a particular program. I found a match with Alberta Eco Trust Foundation, which is based in Calgary, they were looking for an engagement director, and a lot of the skills they were looking for were skills that I had, that I hadn't necessarily learned how to translate. And so I applied for the job and got that, and that brought art and environment together without me really knowing that was what was going to happen. And this role here at Caravan Farm Theater actually really literally weaves it
Mm-hmm.
because Caravan Farm Theater is an professional outdoor theater based on 80 acres of land. And it's the land of the Secwepemc and the Silko-Okanagan people, the unceded territories. And it's a beautiful space. And they have been doing work here since 1978. And I have been here many times, on contracts, working with playwrights, doing dramaturgy, hosting a playwriting retreat here as well. And so I, was talking to them, and they were thinking about, well, how do they more I guess thoughtfully or more or surface the weaving of art and environment. And so we created this role together, artistic and environmental programs manager, to acknowledge those how those things might be weaved and the relationships that I build on behalf of the company with people who are interested in land stewardship and sustainability, and how that interacts with the artists and the art, and how the art contributes to the audience's understanding and the artist's understanding of the environment.
I love this. You've almost created a role for yourself at Caravan Farm Theater based on the land.
Oh yeah,
Land and story and environment.
yeah, and we did. Estelle Shook, the artistic director, and I, it went back and forth creating this role, and it was I believe, to our knowledge, the first of its kind in arts and culture, in terms of that sort of explicit weaving, and we are still learning what that means.
Mm-hmm. Well,
We're
yeah,
still learning what that means.
You're at the leading edge of that, which is and I love how you think. You're just always able to hold multiple points of view and see see what's possible.
No, thanks.
As a professional storyteller or something along those lines, can you talk about dramatic structure of a typical play or a story? And I mean, I am not a professional, but I would say there's 3 acts. And when I first conceived this conversation, I thought, well, things happen in the 3rd act. And is that what happens in our lives? Are plays based on life? Anyway, can you educate us a little bit about the 3rd act, what that is, and then let's talk about if that's universal for human life. I mean, stories end, lives end. The 3rd act happens. Tell me more.
Yes. Well, so the basic thing about the 3 acts is that there's rising action, which is sort of the first part. And then there's the climax, which is sort of the second part. And then there's like falling action is what comes after the climax. So we build towards something that changes, and sometimes we change it, and sometimes something around us changes it. For a lot of playwrights and screenwriters and people who write narrative in that way, it's what they're building towards some shift for the character or characters, and that will change things for them. And then it's the what happens after, how they deal with it, how they engage with the other characters, how they engage with the world around them as a result of that climax, of that action, that allows us to understand how they're going to move forward. So and there's even like in Shakespeare, there's like a 5-act structure as well. But so it's basically like we're rising to something, we're headed towards something happens, and then what comes after is the 3rd act. And it's interesting because I know that structure pretty well. And I've worked in a range of different narrative structures, some of them very nonlinear. But in terms of life, it's interesting because I was contemplating this. I feel like we may not know what we have a series of like climactic moments, and I don't know whether, like, I may be going through. I think I've gone through multiple 3rd acts in my life.
Yeah.
And it's only in hindsight that somebody can like look at someone's life, I think, and go, oh, that was it. That was the climax. And then watching what they did after that. So because I would say, um, the reason I left the job that I had, I was at at Alberta Theatre Projects for about 18 years, from the time I was a very young, up and coming dramaturg, to executive director. And I was sitting there at that, I guess, what could be called a sort of pinnacle role, not sure what was going to happen next. I just knew something was going to happen next, and I didn't know what I wanted. I kind of knew what I wanted, but I wasn't sure. And then the climactic moment was given to me. Like, I didn't choose it, and that climactic moment was a major burnout. Like a major burnout, like enough stress to have a medical stress leave, like that kind of burnout. So that, when I think about my life, sometimes I think about that moment as, at this moment, that's my climax. In terms of the three-act structure, because it changed everything for me. It made me want to, it made me realize what was important in my life. It made me realize that I had been neglecting my health in sort of pursuit of something. And that I wasn't sure what that I had maybe placed value in. I'd maybe placed my value incorrectly.
So not aligned with not aligned with your heart.
Not aligned with my heart. I actually think I forgot who I was for a while, to be honest. And was trying to be something that I thought I should be. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. This was the job. You're supposed to run a thing. You're supposed to be a certain way, when you're running that thing. And then that is what sort of led me to go, no, I don't want to run that kind of thing. I don't know that I ever necessarily want to be in executive leadership again. Because leadership to me is leadership is a practice. It's not a job. It's not a role. And so how do I want to embrace and exercise like a sense of leadership? And where do I want to invest my energy? And I want to invest it in a range of things that I care about, not just the one thing, which is what led me to actually seriously pursue working in the environmental sector and ask questions about how change is made, and also ultimately to move to the interior of onto an 80-acre property in the interior of British Columbia, into a tiny house and do a job like this.
Well, I mean, and what a change. Even if that's not the peak of your life, that's a pretty good story. That's a pretty good play. So how did you, so before you had your health scare, it sounded like there was like a little voice in your head saying, Vicki, I don't know if this is for you, Vicki. And it took that moment to kind of really step back and listen. So tell me about packing up everything from the city, buying a tiny house, your first house, and moving to, I mean, I don't want to say we're lucky to get you on the internet, but you live in a place that's
true. That's a true story.
Yeah.
I mean, I lived in I grew up in Calgary, lived in Toronto really briefly before I came back to work at ATP, like when I was like 22 for like a year. But I lived in Calgary and I worked at the same organization, and I lived in the same apartment for 19 years and 10 months before I moved into this moved out here. So I'm the type of person who sticks around. So the decision to move was a big one. And I sort of sat through the pandemic. Like, I had my health scare. I switched career. Like, I didn't switch careers. I sort of redirected my energy, is the way I like to think of it. And then the pandemic happened, and I was sort of sitting there in my house realizing how little space I actually used in this 2-bedroom apartment in the middle of, Cliff Bungalow Mission in downtown Calgary. Um, how little space I was actually using, and how valuable nature was to me. The more opportunity I had to get out into it, and the more that I learned about it at Alberta Eco Trust, and learned about, and all of my colleagues at Alberta Eco Trust were very outdoorsy. That's a stereotype that about environmental folks that's largely true. so, so I spent a lot of time outside, and I was like, I kind of want to. I don't need all this extra space. I want to be closer to nature, and I don't need all this stuff. And I also missed. I had a wonderful sense of camaraderie and team with the folks at Alberta Eco Trust, but I missed this sort of social collaborative aspect of the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so I missed all of that. I did some new play dramaturgy, and was still working with writers a little bit, including starting a playwriting retreat here at Caravan Farm Theater with the team here. So I was still doing that kind of thing, but I wanted to do that, but I also wanted to keep the environmental element of what I did. And again, Estelle Shook, the artistic director here at Caravan Farm Theater, was the one who asked me, well, would you ever consider working in the theater again? And I said, well, it would depend. And that's when I talked about, like, I would want it to be about hosting artists. I would want it to be about creating, like bringing people together, and gathering people and making sure that they have what they need to create, and be creative. And I will not lose the environmental part of, like, what I'm exploring. That's really important to me. It's a whole new network of people, that I know and that I care about and want to see their work furthered, as well as artists. And so, yeah, that I guess if it would be something like that. And she was like, well, yeah, let's talk about that.
As a matter of fact.
So, yeah. So again, that choice was given to me. Although, I say that the choice was that she brought the choice to me, but I guess I was opening up a path towards it already.
And you didn't have to take it. I mean,
I didn't have to take it.
Mm-hmm.
No.
You didn't have to, you didn't have to move. You didn't have to take the new job. You didn't. What I love about hearing that is you talked about, like, I'm going to say 9-year-old Vicki with the pictures of penguins and on her wall. Yeah. Somehow that piece of you gets woven into this story, the environmental piece, the who am I and what do I love?
Yeah. It's funny because I'll catch myself. I will sometimes say, oh, and I just sort of things just sort of just fall in my lap. Or, people offer me something and I go, yeah, sure. What the heck? Like, I sort of like bumble through life, like going, oh, I don't know, maybe this. But the reality of it is, no, I mean, like, I have pursued opportunities or sort of like been open to opportunities that are aligned with what I've cared about. I just didn't necessarily, I don't know that I have consciously gone, yes, this, but I have gravitated towards and made it known, surfaced, like, hey, this is something I care about. This is something I'm passionate about. I'm not shy about that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I've put it out there and people have responded, or organizations have responded. And so I sometimes will act as if I haven't, like, I've just sort of happened upon things. But the reality of it is, no, I've put it out there, even if I wasn't sure. I couldn't have predicted. Mm-hmm. I could not have predicted most of the things that have happened in my life and career. But they make sense.
Well, and you listen. Do you trust? It sounds like you do trust yourself. Do you trust yourself? And how did you learn to trust yourself?
That's an interesting question. I think early on, when I was learning dramaturgy, in my mentorship, or sort of as a mentee of Bob White and Vanessa Porches, there was a moment where I was like, well, I don't do dramaturgy the way that Bob does, and I don't do dramaturgy the way that Vanessa does. So I guess, I don't know, maybe I don't really know what I'm doing. And then at a certain point I went, well, okay, they trust you. Like they gave you this opportunity, they're encouraging you, they see something in you. So if you trust them, then you got to trust yourself.
I love
Um,
that. If you,
and if you like, and I was like, I do trust them, and so I must have something. I guess I'll go figure it out. But I must have something. And then I started to see the impacts of certain questions I was asking on the writers I was working with, and I went, oh no, I can see that this is impact. I can see the effect of what I'm doing on their work or on the way that they approach their work, and that was huge. And then the other thing was surfing. Honestly, I started learning how to surf when I was in my 30s, and I lived in Calgary, which is not known as a surf town,
no.
even though there is river surfing.
Mhm.
It's not known as a surf town. So learning something as physically demanding and unusual as surfing in my 30s, like well into my adulthood, where you don't try as many new things, um, was revelatory. Like, um, because I learned that I can fall off the board and I can emerge from the ocean with mucus just pouring out of my nose, because the ocean is nature's neti pot. Just like, just, just like really humbling experience of the ocean knocking you down and you looking like, like gross, um, and be so happy and be having so much fun. And I'm not a good surfer. I just love surfing. Um, and so I kind of go, I'm trying that. Um, in trying that, because I was an enthusiast, I was interested in surfing long before I actually tried it. And once I tried it, and I went, oh yeah, I can survive and even thrive, and not even necessarily be great at this, but it's worth a try, right? So I would say that the surfing also made a huge difference to me. Um, and it reminds me that I need to try some difficult things and just trust that it's okay, that even if I fall on my face, um, that's all right. I'll get back up again. Um, so that was huge. And so like the last I started learning drumming.
Uh-huh. I saw that on your Instagram.
Yeah, so I've always wanted to learn the drums, and then I was talking to a friend of mine this summer and I was like, "Oh, maybe I should, yeah, I've always wanted to learn the drums." And he was like, "You should." And I was like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah." So since September I've been taking drum lessons, and that's another thing that's like, um ever since the surfing I kind of go, yeah, why not? Okay, yeah, I'll try it. I'll try it. Because what's the worst thing that can happen? I learned something new. I'm not great at it, but yeah. So I trust that most of the things I do are worth the effort.
Mhm. And
If I
and
want to do them.
and the courage. We haven't actually had a conversation for a while since you've moved.
Hmm.
But I forget how energized I get speaking to you, right? You're so brave, Vicky. Like
I
you,
don't know about that,
well,
but
okay. I mean, I see that because I think when I was originally conceiving this whole third act, it's like, what
yeah.
happens in the third act? I'm a woman of a certain age. Is it the third act? What I was kind of intrinsically implying was rigidity and
Hmm.
fear and oh, what happens next and how to be at peace with getting old. And
Yeah.
when I listen to you, and you are younger than me, but you know, surf, moving, tiny home, creating a new
Hmm.
role, surfing, drumming, and I don't see you as being like, sort of reckless, like, one life, live it. And
Yeah. No.
yeah, there's a kind of just yes vibe in your life. Yeah, okay, this interests me. I'm curious. You're very curious. And I appreciate that about you. You remind me that I'm very curious.
Uh, Thanks, Kerrie.
You're
Yeah. Like,
welcome.
and I it's in, yeah, because I have made a few choices that externally look a little weird, like buying a tiny house. And it's interesting with the tiny house thing, because so many people say to me, "Oh, I just love watching the tiny house YouTube videos." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I did too." And the thing about the tiny house decision was, it. I think some people think it seems like a sort of a rash decision, and it's not buying property. I mean, it's buying a thing that you have to find property to put on, which can be really hard. But I did, so what looks like a sort of impulsive, whimsical decision to go buy a tiny house, was actually like a year and a half, like a good year and a half of like some gentle research that then, once this role became very real, and the tiny house became a real possibility. And as a matter of fact, probably one of the only ways this is possible.
And by this, you mean actually living at Caravan Farm Theater,
yeah,
in the
and
country,
or moving out here and moving out to this area, where housing is like oddly scarce. And so I did a ton of research. I interviewed 5 different builders. I put in the work. I put in a lot of work into my whimsical decision. Mm-hmm. So it is one of those things where it's like, I am curious, and I am pretty thorough. And so any decision I make, even if it seems like, oh yeah, let's just go for it, is like, oh yes. And I also, I have a spreadsheet.
A spreadsheet. We're so similar.
I have a spreadsheet like of the 10 different builders in Canada that I was interested in, and which models in particular I was interested in of theirs, and meticulous notes about my experience talking to each of the builders. Like, so I put the work into my whimsical decisions.
A sort of diligent whimsy.
Diligent whimsy. Whimsy.
How's it?
Diligent whimsy, the Vicki Stroich story.
How has it been in the tiny home? I mean, it's been over a year now. You've had all the seasons, all the feels. What are some of the best things, and what were some of the things where you'd be like, I wish I would have known that?
Well, I love it. I don't regret it in any way, shape, or form. I mean, the journey, you asked about the journey to, like getting rid of all my stuff or all that. That was probably one of the hardest parts, was responsibly, moving on most of my things from a 2-bedroom apartment. So that was a big discovery. And what I love about it is that, one of the parts of the decision was it was going to make me live more intentionally, and it has. I don't just go out and buy stuff, because I got to find a place to put it, and I don't have any more places to put anything. So don't need to buy it. Don't need to buy that thing. And the things that I kept were things that I really felt that I wanted and needed in my life. And I love that it's just enough space, like it's enough space for me. And, it's it's got a very contemporary sort of Scandinavian design. I love how light it is. I love sleeping in I have a drop loft, so I can stand next to the bed as opposed to like climbing up a ladder and army crawling in and out of my, like on top of my mattress. So I've got a very like adult sort of grown up way of being, but I love the loft bed. It feels so cozy. And honestly, I look at one window, there's a transom window right next to the bed, and it looks out into some forest. And so and then there's a window on the other side that looks, in the distance I can see this mountain that's near us here called Halkar Mountain. And so regardless of which, like however I open my eyes, I'm looking at something beautiful. And so I really appreciate that about it.
How has that changed? Like, the words are awkward right now. I want to say like a better human, but are you more human, more spiritual, richer? As you're talking about looking at this nature and being in this kind of nature, and you're a creative person, is there like a viscosity of spirit that comes from living in this place, getting back to the rhythm of nature?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, do you miss the city? And I'm kind of like, there's some restaurants I miss, and there's people. There's people that I miss from Calgary. But I don't miss the city. Maybe I will at some point, but I don't right now because there's always something beautiful to look at. There's always a bird. I mean, the other thing about Caravan Farm Theater too is that the shows, especially our winter shows, involve draft horses. So I walk by three black Percheron horses every day. Um, and I was snowshoeing the other day and a bald eagle flew right over me. And it now it's not even like, it's still awe inspiring, but it's not unusual, because there's bald eagles everywhere right now. So that kind of majesty is everywhere. And I haven't lost my love of like walking. I go hiking sometimes with some friends here, and I pet the pine needles all the time. I'm still like touching moss and stuff like that. And it has made me feel a lot lighter. And I mean, living rurally has its inconveniences, unreliable internet. Um, there's the like water is always a challenge, because it freezes up, or it's the wells are dry or they're not, or like there's all these sort of challenges, but at the same time, um, there's all this beauty as well. And I get to see the seasons change here, which, when you're in the city, you do see seasons change. Of course you do, but you don't see you don't see the subtleties, because it's not everywhere. Like you're seeing the change in what the road conditions are like, as opposed to, when the weird little buttercup style wildflowers come out in April somehow on all the paths.
Are you more intuitive? Do you have like better dreams? Is there a heightened psychic sense that happens living or that's changed since you've been there?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Uh, I don't know that my dreams are, I don't know that my dreams are different, but I do feel, I do, the one thing I can observe, is that I do feel very happy. Um, and I haven't, and what I said earlier, that I sort of forgot who I was
Mm-hmm.
for a while. I remembered this year. And part of that is being out here and being in nature. And part of it is I think re-engaging with art, with the artistic practice that I sort of left for a while because I was so busy running a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and trying to make sure that that work could get done, that I wasn't really doing the work that I loved. And so part of it is I just feel more connected to people and I feel connected to nature and I feel happy and I kind of remember who I was.
Lovely.
And that, so I don't know if my sort of, perceptive abilities or my dreams are different, but I know I'm very happy.
I love that.
Yeah.
How this diligent curiosity, did you get that from your mom or your dad, or like is it something that just surfaced, or was there a little inherited wisdom that allowed you to click into?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I necessarily got it from either of my parents. Um, I think I got it. I don't think I did. I mean, my mother is a very, sensitive person, like very sensitive woman. And so the sensitivity, may have come from that, like
Mm-hmm.
the, ability to sort of, feel things very deeply, which is a part of the listening. It's a part of the empath, the empath journey
Mm-hmm.
that makes me a successful dramaturg. If that's, like when I feel successful, that my sensitivity, which I used to think was
A weakness.
a very big weakness.
We share that. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to think it was a very big weakness, and I now recognize it as like a huge strength. Um, and my father had a very dry sense of humor. Um, and so it wasn't so like, so I got some brave, I got a dry sense, I have a dry sense of humor. And that sense of, playfulness when he was playful, that sense of playfulness, and, sharp wit, I think is probably what I got from them. But this sort of curiosity came from being, I think a bookish, precocious little kid who had to read a lot of books because my brother played hockey. My younger brother played hockey, so I basically had to amuse myself at hockey at like ice rinks my entire childhood. And so I read a lot of books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I Speaking of books, are there books that
Yes.
you want to recommend, or books you have loved, books you want to share with people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I read a lot. Interesting enough, because I work on fictional narrative all the time. It's kind of what I've done my entire career. I don't generally tend to for fun pick up novels. Interestingly enough, like I'll read novels but I don't. So I gravitate towards nonfiction. And I think a lot about climate. Obviously, I think a lot about climate. I think a lot about our how we gather around things that are important to us. So there's a book that I love called All We Can Save, um, and it's a compilation, um, and it's a compilation of writings by women from around the world about about facing the state of the environment and the state of society, and what we can save. Like, what do we want to save? What values do we want to pursue when we think about what? Because I think when we talk about climate, or when we talk about the things that are shifting, we move from we look at a deficit, like what are we losing, as opposed to what are we keeping, or what do we want to keep. And that was really inspiring. And so there's poems, there's essays, and I found the range of voices and a lot of the way that it was explored just really inspiring. So All We Can Save is one of them, and there's another book too that I love, called Wintering by Catherine May. And it is about retreat and rest, and it's about winter. And you want to talk about like third acts or climactic moments. She sort of explores the after effect of a climactic moment, which sort of took her out of the life that she was that she had been building, or that was built for her, and something sort of stopped her. And like the progress and our obsession with progress, our obsession with productivity, and she had to stop for a while. The way that things stop growing in winter, the way that regenerative cycle needs to exist, but we don't really allow it to in our society, because we always have to be productive. And so it's sort of her personal story, but it's also, she actually went and explored how people who revere winter around the world, how they approach it. Like, what are the concepts that they approach it with? And her own, she does her own sort of thing. Like, she starts doing like those sort of polar bear swim style things where, she was jumping in the Atlantic Ocean in the winter and stuff like that. So I found that book really inspiring. It's really beautifully written as well. So those are two that I really, I dig. And I try to read Wintering every winter.
Mm-hmm.
And All We Can Save, I just sort of keep, and I basically hand it out like it's like a host gift that I bring to everyone's house around. It's like, I've got copies of it that I'm like, oh, hi, here you go. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Yeah, I love buying books like that too.
Mm-hmm.
I we're almost out of time. Time is a whatever. If you had to, I love hearing you speak about being happy, because I think so many people wouldn't. Or I mean, okay, I can't speak to so many people. I have to notice when I'm happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to give myself time to notice what I'm feeling. I'm happy right now. I'm happy we're having this conversation. I'm happy
Yeah.
I'm starting this podcast, and you said yes.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what advice or legacy, these are words that are kind of like old school words, but I know your beloved auntie, for example. What kind of
Mm-hmm.
things would you want to pass on to people based on what you've learned about being, I mean, assuming happy is a goal, happy's nice. But about being, it sounds like more about being true to yourself.
Yeah. And I say happy knowing full well that like my life is far from perfect. And probably in about an hour I'll be annoyed again or something like that. But in the general sort of sense, I'm like, yeah, I'm enjoying my time. And I think that is something that I think a lot about is enjoying time. And that is something I would pass on, is that I would love for people to pass on, is that oh, there we go. We've got a guest. All good. Yeah, enjoy your time to the best of your, like, as much as you can. And don't put off enjoying your time. And whatever that, and also figure out what you enjoy, like explore what you enjoy. Because I think we prevent ourselves from doing that quite a bit. And there's don't worry about being good at it before you try it. And if you want to try it, just try it. Because I do think that we think we have to be masters before we attempt something. And also, if there's a person whose company you enjoy, tell them. Like, I also feel like we shouldn't wait to appreciate the people around us, and we shouldn't wait to appreciate what we love. So keep noticing. I mean, stay curious and keep noticing. And when you notice, follow through. Like follow that path. Follow the path of enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Follow the light.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A delight, and I'm so glad that the internet worked for us today on this. It's as we're recording this, it's a cool January day, so I'm so grateful that we were able to connect. And just a pleasure to see you, and good luck in your life, in this life, integrating what it is to be true for Vicki.
Thank you. And you know what? It's what's kind of perfect about it wouldn't be I couldn't possibly be recording anything at the Caravan Farm Theater without somebody walking behind me. So I was wondering if it was going to happen, but I knew in my heart that because there's people everywhere. It's just one of the wonderful things about it, but also one of the funny things about it. So
it's life.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and that's life in community.
That's life in community, absolutely, and that's part of what I was pursuing when I came here. So, and thank you. This was a wonderful conversation as always. I mean, your level of curiosity has always inspired me, and how much you love to learn and explore, and that's always been a really inspiring thing. So I can't wait to hear all of the conversations that you're about to have.
All right, and I can't wait to tell you when I finally try surfing.
All right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. You too.
Bye, Vicki. And here.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Secret Heart Broadcasting. And I wonder what your secret heart's telling you.